The 30 seconds that changed everything. Response time is a number that police departments track and publish and optimize and benchmark against. It is measured in minutes and seconds, averaged across calls by district and shift, analyzed in reports and reviewed in budgets. But that is not how response time actually matters. The way it actually matters is on the other end of the call, in a hallway or a bedroom or an apartment corridor where something is already happening, and every second of delay is a second that the thing keeps happening. Today's 4 cases are all about the relationship between that number and what it means. For situations where the difference between an officer arriving at the time they arrive and arriving 1 minute later is a difference between today's episode and something that could not be told with any of these survivors in it. 4 body cameras, 4 states, for moments where the arithmetic of response time and the reality of what was happening at that address intersected in a way that the footage documents with a specificity no report can match. The 4 cases in today's episode span a 14-month window from November 2025 to January 2026, with 1 case from February 2025 whose body camera footage was released publicly only 9 days before this episode was recorded, making it the freshest body cam release this channel has ever covered. The 4 situations are different in almost every way. 1 is an apartment in suburban Virginia at 5 in the morning where a family is being slaughtered and a 1-year-old is wandering in the middle of the room. 1 is a bedroom in Brandon, Florida, where a 7-year-old is screaming for deputies to break down the door while his brother holds a knife to his throat. 1 is a house in Chino, California, where 2 neighbors calling 911 from their windows can hear a woman shouting, "Do not kill me," through walls while a man with a kitchen knife demands that the officers shoot him. And 1 is a motel corridor in Rohnert Park, California, where an officer on patrol looked into a window and saw something that made him understand that in the next 4 to 5 seconds, a woman's life was going to depend entirely on whether he could get through the door in time. All 4 cases are fully verified through official law enforcement releases, bodycam footage published by the agencies involved, and verified journalism from the outlets that covered each case at the time of the incident. The most recently released footage is from a case that occurred on February 23, 2025, with a bodycam made public on March 19, 2026, a release that happened while this episode was in research. What the footage shows is a basis for the Fairfax County Police Chief's statement that a 25-year-old officer with 2.5 years on the force may have stopped a quadruple murder from happening. Today's episode documents what stopping a murder just in time actually looks like on a body camera. Before the first case, I want you to track one specific thing across all 4 situations. The moment the officer first understands what they have actually walked into. None of these 4 calls were dispatched as a murder in progress. All 4 were dispatched as something more routine, a domestic disturbance, a welfare call, a patrol observation. The moment that classification changes, in the officer's mind and on the bodycam audio, is different in every case. Tell me in the comments which of the 4 moments you think was the hardest to process in real time. I hear a child crying inside. Mantua, Fairfax County, Virginia, February 23, 2025. Bodycam released March 19, 2026. Sunday morning, February 23, 2025. Just after 5 a.m. snow is falling in Fairfax County, Virginia. The 3900 block of Persimmon Circle in Mantua, a quiet residential neighborhood in the Mason Police District, apartment buildings spread across gentle grades, most of them still dark at this hour. Multiple 911 callers have reported a domestic disturbance. Officers are dispatched. What those callers reported hearing through the walls of the Margate Manor apartments was screaming. What one caller saw was a woman with stab wounds pressing herself against the outside of the apartment door. By the time the first officer reaches the building and moves down the staircase toward the unit, what the bodycam audio captures is the unmistakable sound that changes the officer's pace. A child crying. He says it aloud, as if naming it changes what has to happen next. I hear a child crying inside. He knocks. He announces himself. There is no answer. He pushes through the door. What the bodycam shows as he enters the apartment, which Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis described at a press conference as a scene so bloody it was almost incomprehensible, is a man kneeling over a wounded person on the floor of the apartment interior. The man is 54-year-old Chhatradapar, a Nepali immigrant who had received his United States Permanent Resident Card on November 12, 2025, just 3 months and 11 days before this morning. He is kneeling over his son-in-law, Santosh Basnet. In his hand is a dao, a traditional Nepali chopping knife, sometimes called a kukura-style cleaver, with a 12-inch curved blade and a 4.5-inch handle. Chief Davis would describe the weapon at the subsequent press conference as designed for butchery and cutting dense bone. Their pa is not holding the knife at his side. He is actively using it. What had already happened. By the time the officer entered that apartment at 5 in the morning, Chatrappa had already killed 2 people. His wife, Binderappa, 52 years old, was outside the apartment in the stairwell. Discovered by officers when they first arrived, the woman with stab wounds pressing against the door that 911 callers had reported. She would be transported to the hospital and pronounced dead. His daughter, Momtarappa, 33 years old, who worked at a nursing facility and had declined an overnight shift the previous evening to come home and care for her father, was inside the apartment. She had been stabbed. She would die at the hospital. Santosh Basnet, Momta's husband, had been outside clearing snow from his car when he heard the noise from inside the apartment. He re-entered through the balcony door. He found his 1-year-old son crying and wandering alone before he saw his wife bleeding at the front door. He heard her say, "He killed us. He killed us." Basnet moved their son to a bedroom for safety. He confronted Chatrappa. He was stabbed multiple times in the struggle. He told reporters later, "I still regret that I could not save my wife. I tried my best. I still remember the last moment my wife was crying for help. I still can hear the sounds." When the officer entered the apartment and said, "Drop the knife," their pa did not stop. He was still actively stabbing Basnet. The Bodycam footage, released publicly by the Fairfax County Police Department on March 19, 2026, 24 days after the incident, shows the officer repeating command multiple times. "Put the knife down. Drop the knife." The commands are clear, loud, and directly addressed. Chatrappa does not comply. He continues. The footage shows a moment before the officer fires 5 rounds. Their pa is preparing to stab Basnet again. In the immediate aftermath of the shots, the 1-year-old boy, who has wandered from the bedroom and is standing in the middle of the room, begins to cry. The officer is seen on camera picking the child up and carrying him out of the apartment. Chatrappa died at the scene. The 1-year-old was uninjured. The baby boy was placed with a family member. What the chief said. Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis held 2 press conferences about this case, one on February 23rd when it happened, and one on March 19th when the Bodycam footage was released. At the February conference, he used the word bloodbath. At the March conference, having now watched the footage repeatedly, he said, "I wonder if, in fact, our 2.5-year veteran police officer saved a quadruple murder from happening. If not for the actions of our police officer, heroic, decisive, disciplined actions, we would have had 2 more victims on our hands." He said the officer had entered a dark apartment, with weapon-mounted lights helping him see, and had made every decision within the window that the situation provided, which was, by the footage, very narrow. Davis said the officer's response reflected the department's scenario-based training. He said, "I feel confident saying to you that our young police officer not only saved lives, but he acted in compliance with the law and certainly within our policy. The officer has been placed on restricted duty pending the outcome of criminal and administrative investigations, which is standard Fairfax County Police Department protocol for any officer involved shooting regardless of circumstances. The Internal Affairs Bureau is conducting an administrative review. The Major Crimes Bureau is investigating the use of force. The case will be presented to the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney. There was no criminal history associated with Chatrappa and no prior calls for service at that apartment address. Investigators said Dappa had a history of some mental health challenges but could not determine a clear motive. The community of Nepalese immigrants in Fairfax County and the broader metro area gathered to hold services for Binder and Momtarappa in the days that followed. Santosh Basnet, still recovering from multiple stab wounds, was expected to remain in rehabilitation for at least a month. He said his son, the 1-year-old who was carried out of the apartment by the officer who stopped his grandfather, is now with family. The specific detail that separates this case from most officer-involved shooting cases. And the reason Chief Davis released the Bodycam footage at a press conference rather than simply posting it online is what the footage shows at the end. After the shots are fired and the threat has ended, the camera captures the officer picking up the 1-year-old. The child is unharmed. The child is carried out. That is not a procedure or protocol. It is what the officer did with the seconds after the shooting was over. Davis said the footage reflected the department's scenario-based training. He said the officer did exactly what he was supposed to do. He also said something that did not appear in any policy or any training module. I wonder if our officer stopped a quadruple murder from happening. He said it at a press conference, in front of cameras, as a statement of personal conviction. Watching the footage, it is difficult to reach a different conclusion. Chhatradapa, on the Bodycam, were preparing to stab his son-in-law again when the officer fired. He had already killed his wife. He had already killed his daughter. His son-in-law was on the floor. His 1-year-old grandson was in the middle of the room, 2.5 years on the force. Snow falling at 5 in the morning. A child crying inside. A 2.5-year officer, 25 years old, pushed through a door at 5 in the morning because he heard a child crying. He entered a dark apartment, found a man kneeling over a wounded person with a 12-inch blade, gave repeated commands that were ignored, and fired 5 rounds. The police chief watched the body cam and said he wondered whether the officer stopped a quadruple murder. The family he walked in on had no prior criminal history and no prior police contact. The weapon was a traditional chopping knife not associated with any prior threat. There was no way for any database, any prior call, any threat assessment to have predicted this specific morning. The officer who heard the child and walked in anyway is on restricted duty while the investigation runs. What does this case tell you about the gap between the situations that predictive tools can flag and the situations that a responding officer encounters? Tell me in the comments. Snow falling at 5 in the morning in Fairfax County. Multiple 911 callers. A woman bleeding in the stairwell. A child crying inside the apartment. An officer who said I hear a child crying inside and pushed through the door. A man kneeling over a son-in-law with a 12-inch curved blade. Put the knife down. Drop the knife. 5 rounds. A 1-year-old in the middle of the room crying. An officer picking the baby up and carrying him out. 2 women already dead. 1 man alive because the officer arrived when he did. The chief said, I wonder if our officer stopped a quadruple murder from happening. The body cam was released 9 days before this episode was recorded. That child is with family. Bust down the door. Brandon, Hillsborough County, Florida, November 2nd, 2025, deputy on leave, FDLE investigating. Sunday afternoon, November 2nd, 2025, just after 2 p.m., the 100 block of Alpine Drive in Brandon, Florida, a dense suburban community about 15 miles east of Tampa in Hillsborough County. A woman calls 911 to report that her brother, 27-year-old Mario Camacho, has a knife to the throat of their 7-year-old brother and is choking him. By the time the dispatcher is taking this call, the 7-year-old is already in the back bedroom with Mario, behind a locked door, behind a mattress that Mario has shoved against the door from the inside. The caller has also been injured. She has superficial cuts and blood from her mouth from what Mario has done before he barricaded himself and the child. The deputies who arrive at Alpine Drive within minutes of the call can hear the 7-year-old screaming before they reach the bedroom door. What they do not yet know is that on the other side of the mattress, Mario Camacho is wearing a motorcycle helmet and 2 tactical vests with ballistic plates. The body camera footage released by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office on November 3rd, the day after the incident, documents the approach to the bedroom door in its full sequence. Deputy Antonio Gonzalez, 25 years old, 11 months assigned to law enforcement after 5 years as a detention deputy, is a primary officer on the approach. He and his partner are at the closed door. He calls to Camacho, send the child out, please. Bring the child outside of the room. From behind the door, the child screams. He is not screaming for his brother Mario. He is screaming for the officers. In a moment that Chief Deputy Joseph Mauer described at the evening press conference as something that stayed with everyone in the building, the 7-year-old's voice comes through the door and says to the deputies, bust down the door. What was behind the door? Deputy Gonzalez kicks the door. There is a mattress blocking it. He kicks it again. He kicks it multiple times. The door finally gives. He moves through the mattress. Inside the room, Mario Camacho is holding his 7-year-old brother in a chokehold with one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. The tactical vest he is wearing, 2 of them, stacked with ballistic plates, mean that standard center-mass targeting may not be immediately effective. He is also wearing a motorcycle helmet over his head and face. He is positioned in a way that the child is partially shielded by his body. Gonzalez orders him to drop the knife and release the child multiple times. On the footage, which was released by HCSO the following day, Gonzalez can be heard yelling, "I will kill you. Drop the knife. Drop it." The phrasing is tactical, an attempt to communicate through commands to a person who may be experiencing a mental health crisis. And the footage shows the specific narrowness of the window that Gonzalez is operating inside. The child is in the man's arm. The knife is in the man's other hand. There is no wider angle that makes the shot cleaner. There is only this. Gonzalez fires one round. It strikes Mario Camacho in the head. Camacho and the child fall together. Gonzalez immediately grabs the child and pulls him free and out of the room. Camacho was transported to Brandon Regional Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased at 2:47 p.m. approximately 43 minutes after the initial call was received. The 7-year-old was taken from the room by the same deputy who had just fired a shot that ended the confrontation. He was alive. His injuries from the choking and the knife were not specified publicly by the sheriff's office, and investigators did not release details about his condition beyond confirming he had been rescued. Who Mario Camacho was? The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office confirmed that Mario Camacho, 27, had 2 prior domestic violence charges on his record before the events of November 2nd, 2025. Chief Deputy Joseph Mauer said at the evening press conference, "There is no doubt in my mind that that boy would have been harmed if it were not for the actions of our deputies." He noted that mental health appeared to have played a role in the incident and directed community members to the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay at 211 for support. He did not specify the nature of the mental health history or whether any prior law enforcement interactions had flagged a risk that November 2nd realized. Deputy Antonio Gonzalez was placed on administrative leave with pay, which is standard HCSO protocol following any deputy-involved shooting. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement was assigned to independently investigate the shooting under Florida law, which requires FDLE review of any law enforcement use of deadly force. Gonzalez had no prior use of force incidents during his 6 years with the agency. He had become a law enforcement deputy 11 months before the Alpine Drive call. He is 25 years old. The child he pulled out of that bedroom, holding it in his arms after a point-blank shot in a room with a mattress against the door and a man in 2 tactical vests, told the officers through the door to bust down the door. That is a thing that the body camera captures that no press release captures in the same way. That 7-year-old voice, that specific instruction, from a child who understood exactly what needed to happen and said so through a locked door. A 7-year-old being choked at knife-point scream for deputies to kick down the door. His brother was wearing 2 tactical vests and a motorcycle helmet while holding him. Deputy Gonzalez had 11 months on patrol. He kicked through a mattress barricade and had 1 shot available to him without risking the child, and he fired it and pulled the boy free. FDLE is investigating. What standard should be applied when evaluating an officer's use of deadly force in a situation where the only available shot puts the suspect and an innocent person in the same physical space? Tell me in the comments. Alpine Drive, November 2nd, 2025. A sister's 911 call. A child screaming behind a bedroom door. A mattress push against it from inside. 2 tactical vests and a motorcycle helmet on the man behind it. Bust down the door. Deputy Gonzalez kicking through the mattress. 1 shot. Mario Camacho and the 7-year-old falling together. Gonzalez grabbing the child and pulling him free. Camacho pronounced deceased at 2:47 p.m. 43 minutes from the call. The FDLE investigation is ongoing. The deputy has no prior use of force incidents in 6 years with the agency. The 7-year-old is alive. He told them through the door what to do, and they did it. Shoot me. Chino, California, November 16th, 2025. Bodycam released March 9th, 2026. Sunday evening, November 16th, 2025. 9 p.m. The 16250 block of Homecoming Drive in Chino, California, San Bernardino County, in the eastern part of the Los Angeles Basin, a residential neighborhood of single-family homes and apartment clusters. 2 separate neighbors call 911 within moments of each other. The first says, "My neighbors are having a domestic dispute, and he is hurting her. It is really bad, and there is yelling and screaming. He is hitting her. She is crying for help." The second caller tells the dispatcher something more specific and more frightening. From their window, they can see a woman inside the adjacent home, and what they can hear the woman saying through the walls is, "Do not stab me. Do not kill me." Something about a knife. By the time Chino Police Department officers arrive at 16250 Homecoming Drive, the woman inside has been assaulted and the man who has been assaulting her is armed with a kitchen knife. When the officers enter and order him to put the knife down, 29-year-old Royce Johnson of Anaheim tells them, "Shoot me." The critical incident video released publicly by the Chino Police Department on March 9, 2026, more than 3 months after the incident, documents the encounter in the format that Chino PD uses for significant use of force events, a narrated presentation that combines the body camera footage with explanatory context provided by department personnel. The footage shows officers entering the home and encountering Johnson in a position of active physical threat to the woman inside. He is holding the kitchen knife toward her in an aggressive posture. Officers give clear and repeated commands to drop it. Johnson does not drop it. He tells them again, "Shoot me." He then turns toward the victim and begins to pursue her down the hall. The pursuit down the hall. The specific sequence that the Chino PD critical incident video documents, that Johnson, having been given multiple commands to drop the knife, turned away from the officers and pursued the victim down the hallway, is what determines the legal and moral framework of what happens next. The threat shifts from a confrontation the officers are participating into a chase the officers must interrupt. Johnson has a knife. He has been told to drop it. He has refused. He has turned toward the person he has already assaulted and is moving toward her in a hallway where her ability to escape him depends entirely on how much space is between them, and how quickly the officers can close the gap between what is happening and what they can stop. The officers fire. Johnson is struck. He is transported to a local hospital for treatment. The Chino Police Department critical incident video release on March 9, 2026 confirmed that Johnson survived the shooting and was taken into custody following his treatment. He was identified as 29 years old, a resident of Anaheim. The investigation that followed the November 16th incident moved through the San Bernardino County District Attorney's review process, as is required under California law for any police use of force, and through the Chino PD's internal review. The department released a critical incident video as part of its standard transparency process, noting in the release that the presentation had been prepared for public communication purposes in accordance with California law, which requires law enforcement agencies to release video footage of officer-involved shootings within 4 to 5 days. What 2 neighbors heard. The 2 911 calls that opened this case are worth examining on their own terms because they represent the specific mechanism by which law enforcement was able to respond to what was happening at 16250 Homecoming Drive before it was too late. The first caller described what they could see through the window: physical assault, a woman crying, a man hurting her. That description alone would produce a response, but it would produce a response calibrated to the level of danger visible from outside. The second caller provided the specific information that changes the tactical picture entirely. The words the woman inside was saying, audible through the walls, which included specific explicit references to a knife. Those words, relayed to dispatch, relayed to responding officers, meant that the Chino PD officers who entered that home at 9 p.m. on November 16th already knew there was a weapon involved. They entered with that knowledge. The fact that they entered knowing there was a knife is part of the reason the critical incident video documents the approach it documents. The woman inside the house was transported to a local hospital following the incident and treated for injuries sustained to her head and face, according to the Chino PD release. Her health status was not immediately disclosed publicly. Johnson had told the officers to shoot him. The officers had attempted to de-escalate. When he pursued the woman down the hall, they had no further de-escalation option available to them. The 2 neighbors who called 911 from their windows, who described what they could see and what they could hear and who picked up the phone and made those calls, are part of the reason this case has the outcome it has. The woman inside that house said, "Do not kill me through the walls," while Johnson was threatening her. Her neighbors heard her. They called. The officers arrived. Johnson is in custody. 2 neighbors called 911 because they could see and hear what was happening through the walls. One of them reported the specific words the victim was saying, including references to a knife, which changed the tactical preparation of the responding officers. Johnson told the officers to shoot him when they arrived and refused every command to drop the knife before pursuing the victim down the hallway with it. He survived the officers' fire and is in custody. The woman he had been attacking was taken to a hospital. What does this case say about the specific role of community members in law enforcement response? And what would have been different if the neighbors had not called or had not reported the specific details they reported? Tell me in the comments. November 16th, 2025, 9 p.m. Two separate neighbors calling 911. He is hitting her. She is crying for help. The woman through the walls. Do not stab me. Do not kill me. Something about a knife. Chino PD officers entering the home. Drop the knife. Shoot me. The pursuit down the hall. The woman in front of him. The knife in his hand. The officers behind him. Fire. Johnson struck and transported. The victim transported to the hospital. The Bodycam released March 9th, 2026. Two neighbors in their houses who heard enough and called. One victim who said through the walls what was happening to her. Officers who arrived knowing there was a knife because someone told dispatch. Johnson is in custody. She is alive. He looked through a window. Ronet Park, California, June 2024. Officer commended. Suspect charged. June 2024. Ronet Park, California, Sonoma County, about 50 miles north of San Francisco, a city of about 43,000 people in the North Bay. A Ronet Park Department of Public Safety officer is on routine patrol near a motel when something through one of the room windows makes him stop. What he sees happening inside the room is a man with his hands around a woman's throat. She is not moving. She is not struggling. The thing that the officer later describes about the moment and that the department's account of the incident emphasizes is a specific quality of the stillness. A person being strangled who has stopped fighting is a person who is very close to the end. The officer does not knock. He does not wait for backup to announce his presence. He does not hesitate long enough to become the wrong decision. He gets in through the window. The footage from the officer's body camera and the account released by the Ronet Park Department of Public Safety document the next moment. The officer entering through a window, reaching the man identified as a suspect who had been assaulting the woman and pulling him away from the woman on the floor. The officer physically separated them. The woman, who had been limp under the strangler's hands when the officer first saw her through the glass, begins to respond as the officer pulls the suspect off her. She is unconscious for a period during the initial response but regains consciousness and is transported to a local hospital. The strangler is taken into custody at the scene. The officer is not injured. The documentation of this case, from the department's commendation of the officer to the charging of the suspect, establishes what the body camera records, that when the officer looked through that window, the woman on the floor of that motel room had perhaps seconds remaining. What patrol produced? The Ronet Park case is the most ordinary of today's 4 cases in its origin. There was number 911 call. There was no screaming audible from a parking lot. There was no neighbor on the phone with a dispatcher. There was a police officer on a patrol shift, driving past a motel, whose attention was caught by something visible through a window at the right angle and in the right light. The specific combination of a patrolling officer, a motel with windows that face a public road, and a moment when the officer happened to be looking at that window rather than the road or another vehicle or any other of the 1,000 things a person on patrol is tracking simultaneously, produce the intervention. That is the most honest description of how this case reached the outcome it reached. Routine patrol. A window. A look. A decision made in under 5 seconds. The Ronet Park Department of Public Safety formally commended the officer for his response to the incident. The department's communication about the case highlighted the officer's rapid assessment and decisive entry of preventing a death. The suspect was charged with assault and related offenses arising from the strangulation of the woman in the motel room. The charges and the subsequent legal proceedings were not fully concluded at the time of this episode's research, but the charging documents are public record and the departmental account of the incident is confirmed. The officer's name was not widely publicized in connection with the case, which is consistent with how departments handling positive incidents sometimes manage officer identification, differently from how officer-involved shootings are typically documented. What the window showed. There is a category of law enforcement intervention that gets the least coverage of any category in this space, and the Ronet Park case is in it. It is the intervention that happens because someone was looking, not because a call came in, not because there was a witness who called 911, not because a neighbor pressed a button or a passerby stopped a stranger, because a person driving a patrol route happened to be in the right place and happened to have their eyes on the right angle of light at the right time, and processed what they saw quickly enough to act on it. The cases that get coverage are the ones that follow a call. The ones that follow a call have a timestamp, a dispatch record, a response time measurement, and a sequence of documented decisions from the moment the phone rang. The Ronet Park case has none of those things. It has a window, an officer who looked through it, and a woman who is alive. The Rohnert Park Department of Public Safety's account describes the officer entering through the window and described what he found as a violent strangulation in progress. The word progress is doing the work in that description that the Bodycam footage reinforces. Progress means it was not finished. Progress means there was something left to interrupt. The officer interrupted it. The suspect is charged. The woman was treated at the hospital and released. This is the outcome of routine patrol producing a non-routine result on a June evening in 2024 because someone was looking through a window at the right moment. There was number 911 call. No screaming from outside. No neighbor on the phone. An officer on routine patrol saw a woman being strangled through a motel window and entered without hesitation. She was limp and unresponsive when he saw her. She regained consciousness after he pulled the suspect off her. The department commended the officer. The suspect was charged. This case is the hardest of today's four to quantify because it has no call record, no response time, no dispatcher, no timestamp. Just a window, a patrol route, and a moment of attention. What does this case say about the value of routine patrol in a policing environment that is increasingly focused on response to calls? And how many cases like this happen every year without ever becoming part of the public record? Tell me in the comments. June 2024. Rohnert Park, California. Routine patrol. A motel. A window. A woman being strangled on the floor of a room with her body limp and not fighting anymore. An officer who stopped his patrol vehicle and got in through the window. The suspect pulled away from her. Her consciousness returning as the officer held the suspect. Hospital. Charges filed. Officer commended. No call had come in. No neighbor had reported it. No dispatcher had a record of this situation until it was already over. A patrol officer was in the right place and looked at the right window at the right time. That is the entire mechanism by which this woman is alive. She is alive because someone was looking. What the 30 seconds contained. 4 cases. 4 different kinds of just in time. A child crying inside an apartment where 2 people had already been killed and 2 more were about to be. A child screaming behind a locked bedroom door, telling the deputies to bust it down, while his older brother held a knife to his throat. 2 neighbors calling 911 because they could see and hear what was happening through the walls of a neighboring home, where a woman was saying, "Do not kill me," and there was a man with a kitchen knife refusing every command to drop it, and a patrol officer who happened to look through a motel window at the moment a woman's ability to keep living depended entirely on someone looking at exactly that window at exactly that moment. The 4 officers in today's 4 cases, a 2.5-year veteran in Fairfax County, an 11-month law enforcement deputy in Hillsborough County, officers responding to a domestic violence scene in Chino, and a patrol officer on a routine route in Rohnert Park, made different decisions in different situations under different conditions and with different information. What they share is that they acted at the speed the situation required, with the information available to them, in a window that had a very specific closing time. The Fairfax County Chief said he wonders whether his officer stopped a quadruple murder. The Hillsborough County Chief Deputy said there is no doubt in his mind that the 7-year-old would have been harmed if it were not for the deputy's actions. The Chino situation was resolved by the intervention of officers who had been told through dispatch what they were walking into because neighbors called with specific, accurate information. And the Rohnert Park situation was resolved by an intervention that produced number 911 call at any point before the officer was already inside the room. There is a category of officer action that this channel rarely covers because it is the hardest to frame. It is not an investigation that takes months and produces a federal indictment. It is not a survival story where every detail of a near-death experience can be documented in a sentencing statement. It is a moment that lasts less than a minute, that is captured on a body camera, and that ends with someone alive who would not be alive otherwise. The cameras in today's 4 cases were recording when these moments happened. The footage from 3 of them was released publicly within weeks or months of the incidents. The Fairfax County footage was released 9 days before this episode was recorded. In each case, the release was a deliberate choice by the department. This is what happened here, and we want you to see it. What it shows is not procedure or protocol or a use of force matrix. It shows an officer hearing a child cry and going through a door, a deputy kicking through a mattress to get to a 7-year-old who was telling him exactly what to do, officers following a woman being chased down her own hallway, a man who stopped his patrol car because something looked wrong through a window, 4 cameras, 4 moments, 4 people who are alive. Tell me in the comments which of today's 4 cases you think illustrates the narrowest margin, not the most dramatic, not the most recent, but the one where the difference between the outcome and the alternative was the smallest. The cases where the margin is almost nothing are the ones that stay with you. New episode coming. See you in the next one.